There we go. We got it. Hey, terrific. So as I was saying, we have some very distinguished guests here today. And if you haven't already had an opportunity to go to the website and check them out, I'll give you a quick rundown. So I'm going to start with Yarin Kimor. And I hope, Yarin, I'm pronouncing your name properly, because that is very important that we get that right.
First of all, I have to apologize because I got the corona today and some fever, and I'm not in my best shape. But I'll try to do my best, and this is more important than some neglected, unimportant virus. So I'll try to overcome it.
To hear that. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that you caught what the Monty Pythons would have said, the dreaded lurgy, which is really what we're all kind of struggling with. Doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or otherwise.
Yeah, no, I'm totally vaccinated, but I can calm you down that from 10,000 kilometers, it's quite safe in this Zoom. So don't worry.
It's very true. We're not worried about it. This is why we're all on Zoom. It's terrific. So let me give people a little bit of your background. You are an acclaimed creative specialist and author of the best-selling book, The Impossible Made Possible, which I think is really an extraordinary thing. And of course, it's about mental fixations and how do we unleash our creativity. And as a creative, I think this is a really important matter. The focus of the book, of course, is to think differently. And, that's really what we all try to do in our businesses and otherwise. You're also a director and producer of award-winning documentary films and a TV series, and an international lecturer on creative thinking development. And you've spoken to over 3,000 companies. Did I put that in right? Or is it 300 companies? Sounds like a lot, but it is a lot, including IBM, Microsoft, Intel, HP, Bloomberg, etc. So we're really happy to have you here, Yarin, and looking forward to getting some interesting conversation going. My second on my list is Shanker Damodaran. And Shanker, let me know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly also. Pleasure to have you here. Yes, you're here. You're on mute, Shanker.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Very nice to meet all the authors here present today. And are you saying that I start today just now?
No, I wanted to know if I was pronouncing your name correctly. Is it Damodaran? Is that how you would pronounce your last name?
That's correct.
Okay, terrific. So you are a publisher and editor-in-chief of the bilateral trade and inward investment magazine Gujarat Now, which is a comprehensive media platform that showcases the changing landscape of business and investments in Gujarat, India. You have a new book coming up called Golf Business and Investment, and is based on the idea that work is play. And I want to know more about that as we go into our conversation. And you believe that what makes destinations smart is when people experience and express the 9 human needs, which include freedom, adventure, security, and expansion. And I'm all in favor of all of those things. Then I'm going to jump over to Lanie. Lanie Denslow has been a very important part of the Global Chamber for a long time. And she's the founder and principal of Worldwise Intercultural Training and Resources. And as an author, an international speaker, and trusted advisor, she has helped people in Silicon Valley and elsewhere on how to shape the culture and business practices and business protocol. She is known for using humor and candor to help others grasp the complexity of today's global business environment. So Lanie, we want to hear something funny from you today, so we better be prepared. And she's the author of Worldwise, What to Know Before You Go, and co-author with Alison Stewart Allen on Working with Americans. Then we come to Fernando Cordero. And Fernando, I have to tell you, I have looked at your photographs and they are stunning. So we will talk more about that as we go on. You're a cinematographer and an architectural photographer. You have collaborated with the most outstanding architectural firms in the country, and your photographs have been part of exhibitions and publications both nationally and internationally. Your approach highlights the meticulous work that you do as a creator of images from a contemplative and reflective language of architectural works. And I will say, having looked at your pictures, the light and shadows and the way in which you place it is remarkable. Your photographic essays cover a wide range of themes from pre-Hispanic and colonial architecture to modern and contemporary architecture also. And as I said, your management of natural light and the elements of architecture are framed that become sculptural or scenic, and they invite you to stay long and linger on these images to find out what's really going on there. So I love this. This is really great. And as your facilitator, I'm Jacqueline Wales, the author of 3 books, When the Crow Sings a Novel, The Fearless Factor, and The Fearless Factor at Work. And I can't wait to dive into this conversation. So let's start with the first question that I have here. What inspired you to write your book? That is the theme of our author series this month. What inspired you to write your book? So I'll start with Yarin, and let me know a little bit about that. You're on mute.
Oh, okay.
You got it.
Well, my mother was a writer, and my father was a scientist. And I think the combination of both made sort of a harmony of complementary opposites as a whole, because my field in promoting and developing creativity is actually systematic creative thinking. I don't know how to teach to big Picasso or Leonardo da Vinci. I don't think they knew how to do so, but I know how to teach tools and the techniques, how to be more creative in a way that is not dependent on your skill or inspiration or talent, but can be adopted by each one, whether you are square or creative. And I think myself combines this inspiration that I got from my parents, but I also got some inspiration from my kids, because as the kids, we are born creative in anyhow. They don't need no books, no lectures, no workshops, nothing. They are creative, and they lose it during the years because our international education system. So I paid attention to their creativity before it was destroyed. I'll give you just one small example. My son, when he was 8, he started to read some medical books. And when he was 9, he asked me, well, I would like to identify why there is no cancer in the heart. I would like to identify the material that prevents cancer in the heart and to inject it to the rest of the body. Within a few years, it was figured out that this is the leading research in the world. And he thought about it a few years before. Of course, he didn't have the systematic way to research and so on, but the idea was there. So I understood that there's so much creativity that I can learn from my kids as being inspired from my parents and my biography. Because as an investigative reporter in television, I knew how to edit, I was curious, and I collected a lot of material, and I want to edit it together in order to have to create some kind of significance and context, and not just to have very the rushes, let's say, speak in the terms of television, the rushes. I wanted to have the fine cut, and that was what I did in the book that I wrote, in fact, 2 books.
Well, you're raising a very important issue of creativity and how you said something interesting I want to come back to, which is creativity destroyed. And I think that is a major issue for a lot of children within the traditional educational environment. And I feel very strongly about that. And I love that you're addressing that particular piece as well. And the fact that you've got an extraordinarily bright child or children who are already starting to think about changing the world, which is phenomenal. That's great. So I'm going to jump down to Shanker and ask you the same question. What inspired you to write your book, which I know you haven't published yet, but you are in the process of it. So what's inspiring you to do this?
Jacqueline and the guests here today, just want to say that, business is in my essence. And I think business is a way to get across to others of the same kind and produce results which are extraordinary. And going by the Global Chamber, I have learned from Doug that doing business across the world as simple as doing business across the street. Now, when I come to golf, I have been working with bilateral trade for a while with Gujarat, and I see there are large trade shows and there are all kinds of meetings taking place, and yet the fundamental criteria of building trust was missing. And I have friends who are into golf, and I watch them, the kind and quality of their fraternity and what transpires business relationships off the boardroom and on the golf course are probably everlasting. And that inspired me to understand the game of golf. And I had great conversations with golfers and understood that it's not just a sport. It is the sport of sports. It is the game of games. It is the CEO's games, where there are a lot of things that one needs to articulate, one needs to focus, one needs to go beyond certain circumstances and come to the results they need to address. So which is what CEOs do. And so I came to the idea that there is something to this whole golf business and extending it to bilateral trade, which is my basic area of interest. So I checked and I found that there are many places where they have tried to do this, like FDI. Their Japanese come to our country and they play golf together and make some everlasting business dynamics happen on the golf course. So when I thought, how do I divide this? And I met Christy of our Global Chamber in Australia. And I explained to her, and she was very welcoming and warm. And she said, this is exactly what I want to do for women. So I'm just explaining how the things evolved. I was initially planning to do something on inward investments, but then I thought, let me make it more boutique-like. Just 100 golfers can make a whole lot of difference to the investment climate of a destination. Not just that, they can brand that destination. And there can be great broadcasts around it. And the quality of business that can happen can actually eventually, probably you don't need so much of intervention from the government. When people meet people, great things happen. And on the game of the course, the relationships that happen in those beautiful locations and the way they seek and understand each other's psychology, all of that never happens on the boardroom. So I'm trying to articulate this, and Christy says, I have many friends and my focus is women in golf. And I said, we will add that and we will go forward doing that. And so I spoke to a few of my other friends in the business world, and they are very willing to take this whole program into another dimension, which is basically trying to create one-day events where there will be business coaching, where they can play golf and do business and make a difference.
Well,
so
we know
all that.
Yeah, we know that golf has definitely been a big piece in building relationships for a while, and I'll come back to that again shortly.
Sure. Thank you.
I'm going to jump over to Lanie here and ask you again, what inspired you to write your book?
Thanks, Jacqueline. It's great to be with everybody today. So I want to say that this book, the one that's featured for today, is actually the second edition of Working with Americans. My co-author, Allison, and I wrote the first edition in 2000. Think about that, 22 years ago, when self-driving cars and private space travel were comic book fantasies. But one thing that existed then and still exists is that people think that Americans in business are annoying, puzzling, surprising, sometimes delightful, but not always. And we decided then and redecided that that was an issue we wanted to address, that we wanted to find a way to explain some of the things that we Americans do that frustrate, annoy, puzzle other people. One example that some of you have heard me talk about is the way we greet people. We say, "Hi, how are you?" And some of the responses are, "You don't know me well enough to be asking personal questions." And others say, "If you're going to ask me a question, you could at least wait for us to answer." But Gloria's nodding, yes. But for Americans, "Hi, how are you?" is like saying hello. It's just a greeting. And our goal was, in writing this book and updating it in 2019, was to explain some of the things we do so that people could be more comfortable working with Americans. Instead of finding them frustrating, maybe they'd even find them fun. Our goal is that people be able to build productive, collaborative, enjoyable business relationships. And that's why we wrote the book.
That's great. Well, that's an important piece of it for sure. And understanding each other's culture is an essential part, and especially since we are the global chamber, there's an awful lot to learn about different cultures and how we interact. So a worthy contribution. That's terrific. Thank you, Lanie. Fernando, I wish that I could have your photographs in front of us here to show this audience exactly what we're looking at. So I'm going to just suggest that everyone go check out Fernando Cordero on the internet, because there are some amazing images out there. So tell us, what inspired you to write your book? Because I know it's been a collaboration with Peter Krieger. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things. It's a kind of, many of those things are coincidences, because my story of life is my father as an architect, my mother as an interpreter, translator, taught me how to see life in many ways. My father as an architect taught me how to see architecture with the heart, not with a technique. It was something that we enjoy a lot. My brother and sister, we enjoy to go with my father to those magnificent buildings we have in Mexico. Mexico, it's an architecture culture, very deep. So to understand architecture is to understand this complex country in the sense of many, many things: sociological, the light, the problems, the misery, the riches, the poorest, the nature. I mean, everything is abundant. So how can I take this on my arms and talk about myself with this? It's a very complex thing, because to understand light in Mexico is to understand, you have to understand a lot of things, and it's not easy. That's why I study cinematography, because I obviously try to write, but I wasn't a good writer. I discovered my ability to write was very, very limited. So I discovered very, very early in my life photography, because my father has a lot of equipment as an architect, has a lot of cameras in the house, and I was very curious the way those cameras work. It was some kind of, those machines were absolutely time machines, and there were absolutely clockwise machines that transport me to other worlds. So when I understood the way that you can transport yourself to other worlds, taking pictures, everything becomes magic in many ways. So I understood the power of the image, and studying cinematography, I understood the power of how do you can say something, how it can use structures things to understand a global idea. So the defeat was to understand that with one frame, you have to be able to talk about a story. So every time I try, obviously, very hard to do that. Every time I take a picture, for me is opportunity to write a story. And as you tell, Jacqueline, something that I love, you say, if you stop in the images and you start to understand the way it tells the story, and there's a story for you, and there's a story that I told, and there's the universal story of the image, I feel very happy when someone stops and see my pictures. So in this case, a special case, this book was written by a very important critic, German critic that lives in Mexico, Peter Krieger, which is one of the most important academic professors at the National University. He discovered my work. He discovered my work because he's, as a investigator, obviously he's looking at the work of everybody, and suddenly we coincide in something very interesting, which is the geostatics. So he starts to write about geostatic on my work because he discovered many things which are written in the book. And obviously for me was a surprise. Still very surprised because I never imagined that my work has that deep context in all the senses. I mean, I thought I was a good photographer. I was a pretty good photographer, but I never think that my images were so deeply involved with a different reality. So at my age, at 64 years old I discovered that I said something for the past 40 years on my work, which was something really magical. And suddenly this author wrote this investigation about my work, and he managed to understand that those images have an important thoughts about art, but also important thoughts about sensibility, and which is something amazing for me in many ways. And we're trying to publish the book. I mean, the book is completely done, but not printed. We just print 50 numbers with digital media, which is not a good thing for a photography book.
Yeah,
we did that.
Know that photography books are expensive to produce, so
yeah,
you have a lot in there. But I just want to stop for a second, because one of the things that's coming up for me as I listen to all of you, and it is an important issue, is the creativity part. And I'm going to come back to Yarin again for a moment. to talk about, our creativity, and certainly in all of the works of art, regardless of whether it's business or whether it's fiction or whether it's photography or thought leadership, whatever the case may be, there's an enormous amount of creativity goes into all of that. But how do we hold on to that creativity? How do we expand that creativity? And how do we identify that creativity? Because there are many people who would say, well, I'm not a creative, but we're all creative in our own ways. And, every single one of us on this call has some kind of creative process that they use in their day-to-day existence. So Yarin, would you speak to that, please?
Yeah. First of all, Jacqueline, I agree with you that creativity is within us, and those who say that they are not creative, they actually quote all kinds of fixations that other people put on them during their education and socialization without really checking the real sparkle of creativity within themselves. And I think each of us has, and it doesn't have to be blessed by a huge prestige all over the world. The inventor of the wheel was anonymous. Nobody knows who he was. Still, he made a huge revolution. So I don't think it's a question of prestige. It's a question of fulfilling your destiny, your inner feelings and imagination. And that's the reason that I try to combine all the things that I love. And it has to come out of love. I love the drama. I love the experiential way of presenting things, the humor, and I do it in my workshops, but I also do it in my writing, because it doesn't have any. I mean, when I use all kinds of anecdotes, they are under the roof of principles, of techniques, but there is no contradiction between some humor or anecdotes. It doesn't have the image of something soft that doesn't count and so on. No, on the contrary, and I like it. I like to be amused. I like to tell jokes. I like others' jokes and so on, but with context, not just let's have fun. It's good for the bar. It's good to, but I mean, in terms of writing, it has to have context. And I try to combine and to create perfect matching between the anecdote and the principle, the micro and the macro. And that's the reason that in my workshops, I use all kinds of magic tricks, sophisticated ones that want to challenge our perception of reality. It's sort of a maintenance to our mind by moving from the impossible to possible, because at the moment that I show you magic trick and you know nothing about the solution, you become stunned, you become mesmerized, you become helpless. But at the moment that you discover the secret, you say, how couldn't I think about it before? And all the creativity is the feeling of us to have the satisfaction of revealing, discovering new horizons, new idea within themselves, and then to contribute them to and expand it internationally. And I think that the common denominator of all the people who spoke up till now is exactly like that. They look for contexts. They look. Shanker is doing that through games and sort of a boutique way of thinking, and Lanie through bridging all kinds of images that cannot be bridged if there is no somebody like her helping us to understand the two sides. And Fernando, with all the things that he spoke about, how to tell a story and to deliver images in a way that is very, I think each of them, and you too, and all the participants here, are actually dealing with contexts, but they do it from different angles and different directions. And I think it's a wonderful way to combine it internationally.
I think your point is well made about imagery, for instance. All of us are creating images with context within the works that we undertake. And I believe that, you know, the creative spark that exists in all of us is also about taking risks. It's about taking the risk that, you know, whatever you have to say or do may or may not hit the right tone, shall we say. And that's, you know, that's again where that sense of humor comes in. And Lanie, you know a little bit about sense of humor because that's something you take a great deal of pride in. So let's speak to creativity and humor. I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Well, thank you for asking. I think that humor is something that bonds us together. And Allison, my co-author, and I, one of the things that binds us as partners in the work we do is that we have similar senses of humor. So the days when things aren't going so well, we can find a way to have a laugh and sort of sort out those edgy moments. But we believe in humor as a form of communication so much that we found a cartoonist who would work with us on our book and develop cartoons that would capture some of the big themes that we had, knowing that sometimes if people were just thumbing through the book, if they saw a little cartoon, they might be curious to read what went with the cartoon, and that might be the entry way for them to start to understand what we were telling them. I think that sharing a laugh, sharing a smile, as we all are today, is one of the ways that we connect with each other. And Yarin, I can imagine that your workshops are fabulous for bringing the humor in and letting people take a deep breath and engage with you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I will say, Shanker, your idea of work and play, you know, again, if we're looking at creativity and humor as a part of the process, you're building relationships on the golf course. You're getting to know people personally. I would imagine that there has to be a sense of humor in that too. You're on mute.
Sorry. I think humor is a human language to connect. And it's not available for any other species, that we can laugh together. And that laughter brings a deeper chord in another human being. And that's what we are all about. We're trying to make those connections. And being able to connect is a unique human faculty. That is what I have tried to do in my book. That is, initially, I wanted to do something on business and how, on a mechanical level, we think business is all there is inside a framework. But when we go beyond that framework and we understand work is play, when we look at work and we understand a quality of work and a quality of play go hand in hand. So golf is a play. At the same time, it's a very designed play. It has got goal setting. It has got the ability to sense the risk, as you say, or the different variations in the things and how it will all turn out, and how a CEO is able to digest all that and then take it forward. And he's also watching his co-player, and they are able to forge such deep, meaningful relationships as part of this designed way of thinking and behaving. And 4 hours on the golf course makes everlasting relationships. Not so much even if you have known a person for 10 years, they say, the golfers, but they've played together, it's a different experience altogether.
Yes,
So,
because using all kinds of different skills at the same time. And that sense of humor, I would imagine, comes in when you miss a putt or you miss your mark. And, you know, learning, I think one of the things that I know about this is learning not to take yourself seriously, you know, because when we can lighten up and not take ourselves so seriously, that's when magic happens in my understanding of it. And I've seen it at work for myself. So I would agree with you. It's not just about the building of relationships, but it's also getting onto that deeper level. I'm going to jump over to Fernando now because, you know, creativity and humor is what we're really talking about here. And you as a creative being, you know, you've no doubt had your moments when you found the funny side of things when you've been shooting. So tell us more about that.
Well, yes. One of the things that attracts more to Peter Krieger was the way I see. Apparently, my images are charged with irony, which is in a certain sense, in many senses, the way you have to laugh in many things about life, about yourself. Once you broke those rigorous lines of being serious or being deep or being I don't know, very, very, very concentrated and very emotional. Once you laugh about yourself, you understand life. It's something really open and reach of many, many, many things that you cannot see if you're too serious. So yes, definitely, in many senses, I always try to work my images with the sense of sometimes even the sense of the cartoon, which I admire a lot of cartoons made by all the world. I mean, their cartoons are something very, very interesting, and obviously by reading the Mexican literature, the South American literature, the North American literature, there's always that point of view that we have to laugh of life, because obviously a story like Moby Dick is charged of sadness in many ways, but you have to understand that sadness is just about what we think it's life, and we mess a lot. So obviously Ahab searching for the whale, it's something crazy, absolutely. So Ahab, you have to understand him as a crazy guy, like everybody, like El Quixote also searching for molinos de viento. It's always that we are in many ways very kind of sick people in many senses.
I think you bring up something really important, which is, you know, when you're writing a book, there has to be a certain level of obsessiveness in order to complete it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's really, when you bring up the example of Ahab, you know, he was a completely obsessed individual to the detriment of everyone, in fact. But I think that's really what brings up for us as authors, is that there has to be a certain obsession with wanting to share the message, with wanting to share the creativity, with wanting to share the imagery that you've so brilliantly created, and the imagery that all of us as authors try to connect to and create within the structure of the stories that we tell, because everything is about stories. I don't care what it is, but everything in life is a story. Yarin said that earlier, and I absolutely agree with it. And so it becomes, for me in my work, about what stories are people telling themselves, because frequently the stories they tell themselves are not the actual truth of what is actually going on. So that's my work. But, you know, from the point of view of telling the stories of what it is that connects us to something deeper, to something that is much larger than the singular identity that exists here. That's really the joy of writing a book, is it not? And I'd like to hear some thoughts on that. And so whoever wants to go first on this, go ahead.
Yeah, just to go on with the point of story, as a journalist and director, I deal, of course, with stories all my life. But I think that all of us are born with addiction to stories. Father or mother, daddy, tell me a story, and we get it for free. When we grow up, we pay for it. We pay for it when we buy the book, we pay for it when we go to the cinema and so on. But we are addicted to stories since our younghood, and we cannot live without it. The question is if we express the story with a significance beyond the details. And I think that this is our task or duty as writers or developers like Shanker and so on, when he develops something different, and or Lanie when she combines people from all over the world and try to reach some understanding. It's also understand the story of the other side. At the moment that we understand that our story is not unique and the only one, and it's just unique for us, but there are also other unique stories for others, then we can enlarge our perception and grow up within ourselves. And I think it's a wonderful thing that is not dependent on age, because I feel in my age that I cannot argue with my ID, but I can getting older without being old, and then brings it back to the sparkle in our souls, in our mind, and in our hearts. And it's not just a slogan; it's a practical mission to fulfill. And that's the way that I feel as part of my life. People too much deal with the question if there are life after death, but I think that we have to prove that there are life after birth.
I'm going to support that 100%, and I can see the audience is definitely applauding that idea. And I think it really is about how do we live each day and take full advantage of our daily lives and the gifts that we get to have and participate in and share with other people. And I think that's really important. Anybody else want to weigh in on the idea of stories and the impact of stories? Gloria, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah, I want to go back to Yarin for a minute. And you talked about your son and how his creativity was so untouched, it's so genuine as a child. And there's another author on this call that I just read his book, Michael Siever. And he talks about, and Michael, certainly you can jump in. He talks about in his book, as a coach, he has his clients dig into their past, into their childhood to learn more about themselves today. So I think that there is something very untapped in all of us when we don't pay attention to our childhood and reflect on it to find out how that weaves itself into who we are today. But anyway, Michael did a great job of talking about that in his book. Michael, are you there? I see you. If you want to elaborate on that just for maybe a minute.
Yeah, sure. So my belief is that our parents acculturate us to exist in a particular society, or that they make us socially acceptable. And oftentimes in going through that process, the really authentic version or the really creative version of ourselves in some ways can be suppressed. And so my book is kind of this work to be able to take away the suppression and bring back that really natural, very creative, very authentic version of the person.
Thank you. Just let's bring that in. I thought that was important.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, I think it's great to listen to so many creators of ideas talking about creativity. One of the things interesting when you're talking about the child, we have programs that we run for 35, 40 years, even with CEOs and presidents. Each of us in their mind, we have a child and a judge. And when we're born, the child is very creative. In fact, if you remember, when you were 2, 3, 4 years old, you used to create ghosts around you where you used to play with. And then as the parents put up a different spin in the filters, all of a sudden you start losing the childhood and getting into a different age, whereby the judge becomes more important. Now, what's really interesting, the judge kills the creativity of the child. So when we're talking about being creative, the secret is suspend the judge and allow the child to flourish again.
Yeah, I 100% agree. One of my daughters had an imaginary friend when she was about 7 or 8. His name was Hixo, and he lived in South America. That was all we knew. His name was Hixo, and he lived in South America. And she had a whole story around Hixo in South America. It was amazing. She'd never been to South America, so where she got that from, no idea.
You know, we did the test about 20 years ago. A client hired us to produce creative products. You know what we did? They thought we were crazy. And in a way we were, but to be creative, you gotta be a little bit crazy. And so what we did, instead of consulting experts, we actually got a group of children of the age from 8 to 12, and we actually asked them what they would create if they could. Amazing. For example, color diapers, brand diapers have been created out of that, which are today in every Target. Color lamps are created from that exercise. So I was totally blown away. So today, when I'm looking for creative insights, very often I go back to children.
Yeah, I think so. Elise, you had a question.
Thank you, Jacqueline. One comment: as a memoir writer, we dig, we excavate. I like to say I'm a psych archaeologist, digging the gems out of my childhood, my memory, etc. Except that what I recently found was that my son said to me, "That's your story, and your story doesn't exactly relate to my perception of you." In other words, we write for ourselves, I think, and in the hopes that someone else will relate to it. And so what I've learned from this exercise with my son is that in book 2, which I'm currently working on, I am going to have many more people give me feedback so that I'm not just in my head, in my cerebral bubble.
Yeah, and I think that's unavoidable when you're writing a memoir to a degree, for sure. Yeah, I know
Jacqueline, I just wanted to add that wisdom is nothing more than the understanding of a child. And it's a good idea for us to always turn back to our inner child to be creative. What adults perceive as something like a genius, as somebody with an intuitive genius, is basically being under less laws. The laws that have come about as we grow older, and what is the freedom of a child is truly the intelligence that we are talking about, not being intellectual, but the universal intelligence that connects, that makes us so creative. Thank you.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful way of putting it, and tapping into that child within all of us who never leaves, by the way, who's still there. No matter how much we think we're grown up, our kid is still active, and honoring that piece of us, which is really an important piece. Fernando, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, I think in many ways is what I said before. It's not just the talent you're born with. It's also the way you understand that talent, which can be very self-destroyed also, because sometimes your own intelligence, if you're not in the correct path, you can be destroyed by that, which is the case of many of my friends that died. They lost the way many years ago because they couldn't find the place to born, to create, to be themselves. So it's a very delicate thing. You have to be very lucky to to born on a family that stimulates that way, that encourage yourself to be a little bit crazy in many senses, because when I was very young, when I was a child, I was a kind of suicidal in many ways, remembering the way, the place we live. My family owned a beautiful house in the country, and the country was our yard to play. And we have a little donkey, which was a crazy donkey, because the donkeys are made for work, and if they don't work, they are strong enough to destroy everything, because they have to be they born to be workers. So when they work with children, it's not a work. So it was a big risk in many ways to have this donkey and to travel with the donkey for all this beautiful landscaping, and with all this freedom. The country, all this landscape was full of snakes and all kind of poison animals. But for us was a place to discover everything, to discover our own lives. And my father and mother left us play with that, left us go to hunting for prepare something to enjoy it, just for the joy of prepare something that we hunt. And we were 7, 8 years old. I mean, we were really young, and we managed to enjoy all that. And I love to fish, and I love to hunt, and I love to ride horses, and I love to walk, and I love all that in that curious thing.
You've always explored, you've always been curious, and
yeah.
That I can definitely understand, given your background, which is terrific. So we have a few minutes left, and I want to know from each of our authors today, what do you want your audience to take away from reading your book? So I'll come back to Yarin again. What would you like your audience to take away from reading your book?
Well, I think I really made them challenge intellectually, but the main issue is emotion, because Federico Fellini, from the home court of Professor Ensis, said to be maximum objective, you have to be maximum subjective, which means that when you touch your inner emotions, you actually touch the universal emotions of everybody, and then it's a sort of a common objective feeling. And it doesn't contradict the intellectual message, but it has first of all, it has to be emotion. And I think that the emotion is go through inner doubt, inner humor, inner conflict, inner drama of yourself as a symbol of the universal drama and conflict. But first of all, you have to touch yourself, and self-doubt, self-humor are the tools for that. And then it comes to the beginning, when you not to take yourself too serious. And at the moment that you don't take yourself too serious, you become very serious about your work.
Yeah, very good. Lanie, can I ask you, what would you like people to take away from your book?
I'd like people to walk away with a sense of an aha moment, like, oh, well, that's why they do that. Okay. Well, knowing that, then maybe we can figure out a way to work together, to engage that, aha, they're really not trying to make me crazy, but there is a reason. So knowing that, good things can happen.
Excellent. Shanker, what would you like people to take away from your book? In one
a few things in terms of basically 3 things. one needs to discover the child within, what I call as essence, and that happens when you play. And never forget play at any moment in life. You need to find that spot where you can look at life from what everybody understands as a laughter and lightness in essence. Now, when you look at golf, you see standards, beautiful scenic, beautiful places, very high standard place. And I think there is a connection that happens when you have the child at play and the environment is beautiful. There is something higher that touches you. Everybody is seeking, whatever they're doing in life, something higher needs to touch, which I call as presence. It can be philosophical, but what we call as a genius is happening around these 3 points. And I believe that. So we have to go with these 3, and I will add another 3, which is basically always one is playing with oneself. One must share that joy with somebody else. That is why golf. The third is we have to extend the entire opportunity across the world or across people who love this, which is what the FDI attraction, all that I term it as, which is about bigger things to happen. But one must know how to contribute on a global scale.
Beautiful.
That balances the person. Thank you.
Excellent. Fernando, 1 minute. Tell us what you want people to take away from not only reading your book, but viewing your book.
Well, strictly talking, I'm not sure. I'm not sure really. I would like to be discovered. I would like to be analyzed. Why not? I would like to be part of a long story of photographers and photography in times that photographers and photography are so abundant. I mean, there's so many that I would like to be part of a different thing, the way I approach to subjects, the way I approach to landscaping, to architecture, and the way I approach to myself. I would like to be discovered by that in many ways. That's why the book goes with an exhibition. So probably that.
That's great. I love that. Well, we all want recognition, which is another reason why we do what we do. So I'm with you on that one. I have 1 minute left, and I'm going to say, first of all, thank you to all the authors who showed up today for this fabulous conversation and taking the time out of your day to be here today to share it with the global audience. I'd also like to mention that for next month, we have Alex Devereaux, who's going to be doing the facilitation. And Alex, if you could unmute yourself and tell us for a moment about what you're doing next month.
Wow. Well, thanks, Jacqueline. And good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, depending on where you're located. Great panel. It was a nice, eclectic, creative, the range was so great here. And so I just want to thank all the panelists and sharing their story and sharing their insights. It was just wonderful. I'm a golfer. so enough said there. Anything I could always talk about golf, but I also saw other things that I thought was very wonderful too. This panel shared too in terms of creativity, and of course, Lanie, you have that people interaction, collaborative thing. That's what needs to happen in golf too. We have rules in golf, but sometimes we get a little carried away with that agenda. And then Fernando with his creativity in terms of architecture, et cetera. I have an architectural background. I have a structural engineering background. So I love structures. So there you go. So you touch my heart there. And then of course, so we have our group that's starting next month will consist of 4 people. Flavia Campbell, she'll be talking about intellectual property and copyright. I think it's Adai, is it Adi or Adai Jaffe? He's speaking about how to utilize cutting edge research in TED Talk. And of course, Elise, she's here today. And so she'll get a chance to share more about her story. She's got a lot to share with us in that session. And then Lamore Friedman will also be talking about book interviews and promo trailers. And of course, Jacqueline, you kind of helped us out there in terms of the trailers and using video to kind of inspire people to to read your stuff. So I thought that was pretty good. But overall, you know, we should have a great session. We again, thank you so much for everyone sharing today, and we hope to see you next month.
Okay, well, we are at the top of the hour. So again, thank you all for being here. It has truly been my pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I hope we can keep it going, because I definitely want to know more about what you're doing, how you're going, and you know, let's go and change the world. That's what I say.
Do we have time for Doug to give a quick little recap?
Yeah, sure.
Are you there?
It definitely emphasis on quick and little. So thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you, Jacqueline, for your leadership and walking us through just a really exciting and inspiring conversation today. Really took a lot away. Gloria, thank you so much for all that you do in pulling this together. I'm left with one big takeaway, and that is I love the Global Tribe. I love all of you and the way you approach life. And, you know, it's okay, even though it seems sometimes contradictory, to love ourselves, but also want to improve ourselves. It seems contradictory to some as well that many of us are deeply loving of our own country, and yet we want our country to improve, and there are opportunities to do that. And similarly, those of us in the Global Tribe love the world, we love to eat, we love to do business, and yet there's so many more things to do to grow business, to improve life, to improve so many aspects of the world. And so thank you all for finding places where you can have an impact, actually doing something about it, and inspiring others to make improvements and to build the opportunity for future generations. Thanks, everybody. And we look forward to not just next month's conversation, but a series of other conversations that we have every day, including several, I think even today and tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. And I'll turn it back to you, Jacqueline.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Doug. Always a pleasure to be here. And once more, everyone, blessings on you. And I look forward to staying in touch. So enjoy the rest of whatever day you've got left to you. See you again. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.